Welcome you all to my class on Preface to Shakespeare by Samuel Johnson. Dear students, in today's class we are starting a new text, and in my previous classes I focused on linguistics. I explained different aspects of linguistics, basically of phonetics and phonology. Now we are shifting our focus from linguistics to critical study or critical analysis. It's an essay by Samuel Johnson, and Samuel Johnson was a writer of neoclassical age. He was an essayist, and he was a very prominent writer at that time, and he is still evaluated with respect and esteem. Now, at the very beginning, I am not going to tell you about Samuel Johnson, and I am not going to tell or explain what kind of critic he was, or I am not going to, evaluate Samuel Johnson as a critic. But we have to consider himself. We have to fix his position and evaluate his position as a critic in the world of literature. But that's our second issue, because if I go for analysis regarding Samuel Johnson's achievement or his skill in the world of criticism, then it will be a kind of vague. It will give you a vague idea about everything. So what I feel that at the very beginning I must explain what Samuel Johnson said about William Shakespeare, or how Samuel Johnson evaluated Shakespeare's writings. So at first, what we are going to do, that we will explain what Samuel Johnson said about Shakespeare. And after completing the text, then we will evaluate Samuel Johnson as a critic, whether his position as a critic is beyond criticism or not. Or at the time of reading the text, we will also try to evaluate the critic or his position. But at first, our main focus will be laid on Samuel Johnson's view towards William Shakespeare's writing. That's what we will do first. And our second step is to evaluate Samuel Johnson as a critic, that the way he criticized, not only criticized, evaluated, explained Shakespeare's writing, whether he did it in an unbiased manner, whether we agree with Samuel Johnson on different aspects regarding Shakespeare's writings or not. So, dear students, let's start our explanation and analysis of Preface to Shakespeare by Samuel Johnson. Now, as I have already said, it's a critical essay on William Shakespeare. And what did Samuel Johnson say, and how did he start his essay? He divided his essay into several parts, and the starting part at the beginning, he focused on Shakespeare's enduring appeal. That means when he wrote this essay almost 100 years after Shakespeare's death. Almost, I say. And in the neoclassical age, I said, so 100 years have already elapsed after Shakespeare's, period or time or age. So what happened during these 100 years? Don't look at him from the point of view of a modern reader, because Samuel Johnson is not a modern critic. So when he evaluated Shakespeare, it was only 100 years. And what happened after 100 years? What was Shakespeare's position after 100 years of his death? So that is the point of view from which we have to look at Samuel Johnson's analysis of and evaluation of William Shakespeare. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say, that Samuel Johnson's essay he wrote this essay almost 100 years after Shakespeare's death. And how did he evaluate William Shakespeare? So, what happened after 100 years? Was Shakespeare still very popular among the readers, among the spectators on stage, and among the readers of his sonnets and poems? So, what was Shakespeare's position in the society? And now, I have already said that he divided it into several parts, and the first part, Shakespeare's enduring appeal, Samuel Johnson wants to focus on the importance, the popularity, and the appeal that Shakespeare's plays, his poetry still created at that time, obviously. And then he will also focus on the merits of Shakespeare's writings, basically plays, dramas, and demerits of Shakespeare's writing. He will also talk about three unities, whether Shakespeare maintained those three unities or not. He will also talk about Shakespeare's tragicomedies or history plays. So he will evaluate Shakespeare from different angles, and he claims at the beginning that he is doing it from an unbiased point of view. He is not biased, he is saying. He acknowledges, he admits the supremacy of William Shakespeare. He admits that. He agrees that Shakespeare was a great writer. He doesn't have any confusion about that. I'm just giving you some introduction about this, otherwise it will be difficult to understand. So he has great, honor, great respect for William Shakespeare. He knows, he admits that William Shakespeare was a great writer. And still, he says that no writer, no playwright, no poet is beyond criticism. So, and criticism is not a negative word, because criticism is something which you apply to a particular poet or a dramatist or an essayist or a novelist, whoever the writer is, whatever be the genre. What is important, if you criticize that person, the writer or his writing, then things become clearer. So we have a misconception regarding the word criticism. We think that criticism means finding out the weaknesses of a person, finding out the weakness and loopholes of a writer. So that is not what is criticism. Criticism is telling the truth from an unbiased point of view. Nobody is unbiased in this world, but still he will look at it from an objective point of view, not subjective. My Shakespeare can be my favorite writer. Shakespeare may not be my favorite writer, but that doesn't matter. When I will criticize, when I am a critic of Shakespeare, I must look at his writing from an objective point of view. If I think that I don't like Shakespearean plays, so I will simply find out the faults of Shakespeare. So it's not objective way to look at things. It's subjective. It becomes purely personal. So what Samuel Johnson tells us at the beginning, that he will look at Shakespeare from an objective point of view. He will try to evaluate Shakespeare from an objective point of view, and that's the point of view with what he starts analyzing and evaluating Shakespeare. And he says that what is the common perception of readers towards antiquity or towards the writers of the past. Remember, dear students, we have not only the Bangladeshi people, all the people of the universe. We have a common tendency to say that the writers of the past were great, and we don't want to give prominence, and we don't want to give acknowledgement to the recent or to the current or to the contemporary writers or poets. So that is a problem of the whole universe, not of a particular society like the English society or the British society. It's a problem across the universe, that whenever somebody will ask you that who is a great writer, the common tendency is to go back to the history and telling that they were great, and nothing is being produced nowadays. So that is the common tendency. And we always prefer to tell that the past writers or the writers of the past, they were great. So what Samuel Johnson says, that that's not the reason why I am going to tell you that Shakespeare was great, because we have a common tendency to tell the people of the past as, or consider the people of the past as great writers or poets or dramatists. They hold that the criteria of evaluating a writer should be the excellence of his work and not his antiquity. So, what is important, that when we will consider a writer and his greatness, his importance, not in terms of his antiquity, that he is the writer of the past, because I am telling you again that the writers of the past are always, considered with high esteem by us and by the readers. It's a common tendency. And we should not tell that Shakespeare is a writer of the past and that is why he is great. Rather, antiquity has its blind votaries who indiscriminately praise everything merely because it dates back to the remote days. And it's the kind of, superstition that whenever we read any writer of the past, we say, oh, he was great. And that's the common tendency. It is also true that spotlighting the merits of the ancients and the faults of contemporaries is more congenial to many critics. And Samuel Johnson, at the beginning of his essay, he is also criticizing other critics and saying that the critics have a common tendency to find out the merits of the past writers, of the ancient writers, and to find out the demerits of the contemporary writers. And this is very interesting and significant. And I also think personally, I also agree with Samuel Johnson because people, even nowadays, if you look at people, you will see, they will say, well, they were great. Shakespeare was great. Dante was great. Homer was great. And Chaucer was great. So whenever they will give an example, they will say, they were great. The writers of the past, they were great. And whenever they evaluate the writers of the past, they evaluate them through their strength. They don't try to find out the weaknesses or the loopholes of the past writers. And when they evaluate the present writers, they always evaluate the present writers with their weaknesses, not with their strengths. So this is within our mind that this is the way we evaluate, writers of the past and the present. So in simple words, our common tendency is to find out the strengths of the past writers and to find out the weaknesses of the contemporary writers. As long as an author is alive, the tendency is to judge him in the light of his worst work. And as long as a writer is alive in this world, we always try to judge him, that writer, with his, worst work. A writer has his good work, his best work, and his worst work. And our tendency is to judge the writer of the contemporary or the present writers with their worst work. And after his death, the practice is to regard his best work as his most characteristic and judge him from that point of view. And when he dies, then we forget all his weaknesses. And then we start evaluating that person or that writer with the strengths he shared or possessed. So that is the common tendency. And why Samuel Johnson is telling this? Because he is telling this to claim that he will look at Shakespeare from an objective point of view and he will disregard this common tendency of other critics. So he claims that he will look at Shakespeare from objective point of view. So, continuation of esteem, a criteria of merit, obviously, in weighing works of literature, the only test that can be applied is length of duration and continuation of esteem. So, what is important? A writer of the past, is he still surviving? Or does his work still, are still appealing to the readers? Or does the person still attract, or does whether the writings of that person, the plays or the dramas or the essays of that writer still attract the readers or not? Or for how many centuries they attract? Whether that person or that writer can be confined to a particular age. There are many poets, there are many poets who can be confined to a particular age, whose significance lies basically to the social, political realities of particular age. For example, Tennyson was a Victorian poet, and if you read the poetry of Tennyson, what you will see that everything what Tennyson reflects in his poetry is Victorian. But at the same age, Browning was also born. And Browning is not that much Victorian as Tennyson was because he is beyond his age. And what Johnson wants to share with us that he is trying to say that a writer has to be judged from the point of view that how long he survives in the mind of the readers. That is important. Shakespeare still survives. he is still in the minds of the people. Shakespeare is not popular only in England. Shakespeare is popular everywhere in the world. So probably that's what Samuel Johnson is going to share with us. It is quite natural that mankind examines and compares works which they have possessed long, and in case they go on praising them, it shows that they have found them to be really valuable. No production of genius can be termed excellent until it has been impartially compared with other such works, just as no one can call a river deep unless he has seen and known several rivers and judges the particular one in comparison with the others. And when you will say that this writing is extraordinary, that writing has to be compared and contrasted with other writings. Otherwise, you cannot say that this writing is great. When you will say or evaluate a person and consider that person as someone great, you must put that person into comparison and contrast with other persons. Similar is the case with writers. Similar is the case with players. Similar is the case with actors. So whenever you want to give a label to a person as great, you must put that person in comparison and contrast with other persons and his writings with the writings of other writers. So that is important what Johnson is saying. He's saying that a person's greatness has to be judged in comparison and contrast with other writers. A literary work is primarily tentative and can be estimated only by its proportion to the general and collective of humanity, and its ability has been discovered in a long succession of endeavors. The reason why the works of antiquity are held in esteem is not blind adulation or superstitious belief in their superior wisdom, but the fact that they have stood up to scrutiny of time. So, what he says that why the writings of the people, I mean the writers of the past, are still very important, still inspire us, or still they are evaluated with importance and significance with high esteem, is not because they are the writings of the past, but because they have survived time and place. So that is the reason a writing of the past should be treated. That is how a writing of the past should be evaluated. So if you notice that a writing, a drama, a poem, a novel of the past survives time and place, it goes beyond the boundary of time and place, then you must say it's a great work of art. Otherwise, don't evaluate or don't term a work of the past simply because of its antiquity. That is injustice to other writers. So when you will term a writing of the past as a great writing, term it from the point of view that this writing has survived time and place. Don't say or don't term this as a great writing only because of its antiquity and pastness. So that is what Johnson is saying. So if Shakespeare is great, it's not because Shakespeare is a writer of the past, but it's because Shakespeare still survives and is still popular among the readers of the world. The enduring eminence of Shakespeare. So from this point of view, now he is going to Shakespeare. The works of Shakespeare have come to assume the status of a classic. He is saying, this is important, that the works of Shakespeare are classic. Now, don't get confused. What is classical literature and what is classicism and what is classic? Now, basically, you know, classical literature refers to the old Greek and Roman literature, basically, Iliad, Odyssey, and then Sophocles, Oedipus, you have King Oedipus, you must have read, and the writing of, the ancient writers of Greece and Rome, they were treated as classical writers, and that age is also treated as, classical time. Now, classical literature basically refers to the literature of ancient Greek and Roman literature. Now, why that literature is termed as classical, there are many issues to discuss, and one of the issues is that they followed rules of writing, and you must have read Aristotle's Poetics as well, and you must have also noticed that how they maintain different rules in their writing. and that is basically classical literature. And what is classicism? Classicism is, again refers to the writing of that type of, poetry or drama, this and that. And at the same time, classicism also refers to maintaining or adherence to rules as well. And there are other characteristics, of course, of classicism. And what is classic? Now, classic is to some extent different from classical literature and classicism. How? The the word classic is applicable to classical literature of Rome and Greece. True. The word classic is applicable to classicism as well. It's true. But the word classic has a different connotation, and that connotation is a writing which is beyond time and place is also considered as a classic. The man who is beyond time and place is also considered as a classic. And the writing of ancient Greece and Rome is always considered or are always considered as beyond time and place. So that is another reason why that literature is also known as classical literature. And apart from that analysis, apart from that explanation, we will say that if a writing or if a novel or if a poem or if a drama is beyond time and place, that means if the appeal of the drama can, attract the readers 100, 200, 300 or 400 years of the publication, then it's a classic. If a writer survives even up 400 years after his death, then he is a classic. Probably, not probably, Samuel Johnson is telling or claiming that Shakespeare was also a classic. Why? They are credited with enduring fame and respect, as these works have outlived one whole century. Now, when he wrote this essay, it was almost 1 century that has passed after Shakespeare's writings. Now, since these writings have survived successfully 100 years, which is the test normally laid down in such cases, they have attained the prestigious position of antiquity. Now we can say these writings are the writings of antiquity. The topical allusions to local customs and prevailing manners in Shakespeare's works are no longer relevant, and his works are read for the literary pleasures they provide. The kind of customs that we see, the kind of lifestyle, the kind of society we see in Shakespeare's plays, uh, those things changed. Those things witnessed changes even within 100 years. And now, after 400 or 500, 500 years, you know, when we evaluate Shakespeare and his writings, so we notice that many things have changed. So, what will you say? When did Shakespeare die? He died in the 16th century. He was born in 1564. You know, so he survived in the 16th century as well. 1616. So what happened? So how many years have we passed? We have passed 400 years. And what have we seen? We have seen during these 400 years that his popularity is still there. He's still the most popular, dramatist and poet, one of the most popular dramatists and poets of the universe. But if we concentrate on the writings of William Shakespeare, what we notice? I mean, basically the plays of William Shakespeare, what we notice? We notice that many of the manners, many of the customs, many of the dressing type, many of the behaviors, many of the settings have changed. Definitely, during these 400 years, they have changed. But the appeal of the drama, the appeal of Shakespeare's writing has not decreased. Why? Because there is something in Shakespeare's writing which has survived the passage of time, which has survived, the boundary of England, which has crossed the boundary of England. So, from that point of view, Shakespeare is obviously a classic and a read just for pleasure they offer. They are thus praised disinterestedly by generation after generation. However, it would not be to blindly believe that human judgment is never infallible. Even though a few works have met with popular approval for a long period, it is possible that this approval may have been based on prejudice or fashion. Now, he is again saying that it can be a fashion, it can be a kind of superstition that people are saying Shakespeare was great, so we will also say Shakespeare was great. So that should not be the practice of telling someone a great. That should not be the style of terming someone as great. Rather, we will term someone as great in terms of his quality, in terms of his, strength of surviving time and place. So it is not simply because of the fashion and superstition of time we will term William Shakespeare as a great writer. Rather, we will look at him or we will judge him in terms of his writing. It is indispensable, therefore, to probe into the facts which enable the works of Shakespeare to attain and retain respect or esteem of his countrymen. So, it is necessary that we have to investigate the facts, the reasons why Shakespeare is still popular. We should not say that Shakespeare is great because people say Shakespeare is great. We should not say Shakespeare is great because he was great when he was alive. That's not the way we should treat Shakespeare. We should rather say, that Shakespeare is great because his writings are great. And why his writings are great? So, in order to say that, in order to establish Shakespeare as a great writer, as a great essayist, it is necessary to establish him or his greatness in terms of his quality, not in terms of superstition that he was great. We have got the superstition, and you know that Samuel Johnson is very much right over here because we readers have got the superstition that if I say that writer is not great, people may criticize me because everybody says that person is great. So that is not the way we should consider. We say that that poet is great. We say that novelist is great. That dramatist is great. Simply because people call them great. But that is not the way an educated person should speak. An educated person should speak from, based on rational ground. Now, we are starting, merits of Shakespeare. So, what I have said or what I have shared with you during this time, that I wanted to share with you that this is a new, text, and in this text, Samuel Johnson is going to share with us the merits of Shakespeare's writings, demerits of Shakespeare's writings, or weaknesses of Shakespeare's writing. Now, look, when someone says weaknesses of Shakespeare's writing, you feel that you are also feeling a kind of pain in your heart that did Shakespeare possess any weakness? So your mental setup is not ready to accept the word weakness with the word Shakespeare. You think that Shakespeare should not possess any weakness, or Shakespeare did not have any loopholes in his writing. So this is, prejudiced point of view. This is your superstitious mind. A mind which is not superstitious is always ready to accept criticism. As a man, a person, as a man, every human being of this universe shares strengths and weaknesses. What is strength in today's world may be treated as a kind of weakness in tomorrow's world. Nobody knows. So, how you will be judged tomorrow, how I will be judged tomorrow after 100 years, if we survive, we will not basically, physically, it's not possible for us to survive. but even the people who will survive in the minds of other people, how they will judge the writer, how they will judge the scientist, how they will judge the painter, time will settle. And when you will term a person as great, you have to term that person great in terms of his quality, not in terms of superstitious mind. So whenever I am telling you that Johnson is going to explain the merits of Shakespeare now, and then he will explain the demerits of Shakespeare or the weaknesses of Shakespeare, and then he will also defend Shakespeare, because there was already some criticism, was developed against Shakespeare regarding his violation of three unities and poetic justice as well. Now, some of the criticism already raised against Shakespeare will be defended by Samuel Johnson also, and he will, from his point of view, he will also focus on some weaknesses of Shakespeare, and then he will also explain the three unities, whether Shakespeare maintained those three unities or not, and whether adherence to three unities it was necessary or not. So many issues will be discussed in this essay, and hopefully I will take four classes on this essay, four or five classes on this essay. Now, what I believe that I am trying to frame, or I have tried to frame my lecture on Preface to Shakespeare in such a way that if you follow these four or five classes, I am quite confident that you will be able to answer any question, and you will be able to answer, discuss with your classmates and with other people regarding Samuel Johnson's critical essay, I mean Preface to Shakespeare. So it's my request to the students to attend these four or five classes. Today I took one class, and I am not going to explain the merits of Shakespeare. I am just telling you that we started the essay, and the starting is also very important, because we have already come to realize that Samuel Johnson claims he is not a man of superstitious bent of mind. He will not call Shakespeare great because people call him great. He is telling Shakespeare is a great writer after analyzing and evaluating Shakespeare's strengths and weaknesses. You know that you may agree with Samuel Johnson, you may disagree with Samuel Johnson. He will show some merits of Shakespeare. Those merits may appear to be demerits to you. He will say, or he will focus on some of the weaknesses and demerits of Shakespeare. Those demerits of Shakespeare may appear to be, or may seem to be, merits of Shakespeare to you. So you can also criticize Samuel Johnson, but it is only possible after your understanding with the text, I mean Preface to Shakespeare. You will attain the proficiency and quality of criticizing Samuel Johnson if you don't like his point of view. For example, uh, I also disagree with some of the points of Samuel Johnson, which I have not discussed yet. I will discuss in my next classes. There are some of the demerits that he says. His point of view, or his evaluation of Shakespeare's comedy and tragedy, also raised questions afterwards. So Samuel Johnson himself was criticized afterwards, and you can also criticize Samuel Johnson, but everything is possible after our understanding of what Samuel Johnson says. So in today's class, what we learned that Samuel Johnson fixed his position as a critic, that he is unbiased, he is looking at Shakespeare from objective point of view. He will tell Shakespeare a great person, a great writer, in terms of analysis of Shakespeare's writing, not because people call him great. There is a common tendency among the people of the world of terming and telling the writers of the past as great writers and the writers of the present as ordinary writers. And we have again another tendency of evaluating the writers of the past through their merits or through their strengths or in terms of their strengths, in terms of their good writing and best writing, and we always prefer to judge and evaluate the contemporary writers in terms of their post writing. So this is biasness and superstition. Samuel Johnson claims that he is far away from this superstition, and from an unbiased bent of mind he is going to unfold, unveil the merits and demerits of William Shakespeare's writing. So that's all for today's class, and I hope that you will attend my next classes on Preface to Shakespeare as well. Thank you very much.